Okay. So my name is Bronwyn Williams. I am the director of the University Writing Center at the University of Louisville. I've been at Louisville about 15 years, and I also served as director of the comp program for 6 years, from 2004 to 2009, and I've been Writing Center director since 2011. University of Louisville's urban university of about 20,000 plus students. It's the largest city in Kentucky. Most of our undergraduates are from the area. A substantial number are first generation college students. We're Research One University. So a lot of our undergraduate students, the profile is very regional, but we do have a nationally recognized RecComp doctoral program and a very large med school. So there's sort of a distinction between the scope of the undergraduate program and the scope of the graduate students. Excuse me. You can edit that out. About 15% of our students are African American. We also have an increasing number of international students, Latino students, South Asian students at the university. The Writing Center that I direct, we have about 15 consultants who are first-year master's students, most of them, or PhD students. The reason we have so many first-year master's students is an accreditation issue. They can't teach their first year in the master's program. So they spend a year in the Writing Center working with their graduate students in English. And then the next year they'll teach. And we really like this setup because they get a year of really working closely with text and with responding to student text before they have to then also figure out everything else. Oh, I'm sorry. They have to figure out everything else about running a class, developing a syllabus and all of that. And they also get a sense of what student writing concerns look like, which I think makes them a lot better teachers. We have a virtual writing center. We have an office down at the med school. All of those combined, we probably have between 5,500 and 6,000 visits a year to the writing center. We have about 15 consultants total. So we're very busy. But we're very well established. We're on the third floor of the library. We are, we always want to grow, but we've grown about 10% each year I've been director. But we also, I think we have obviously there are always misconceptions about what a writing center does, but by and large I think we have a nice institutional presence. The upper level administration, I think, understands who we are and what we do. I hope. So that's sort of at least gives you a ballpark sketch of where we are. Oh, I should say administratively, I'm the director. Supposedly it's 10% of or 20. Supposedly it's a quarter of my job description.
Oh, okay.
So supposedly I spend 10 hours a week doing it.
Oh, well, that's funny.
Which is like a myth.
Laughable.
Right. I also have a full-time associate director.
Okay.
It's a staff position, and he's amazing. He really runs the place. And then I have several assistant directors who are PhD students who do a number of different things. Some of them do work within the physical writing center, mentoring, doing special projects. One works primarily down at the health sciences campus, and then one does a lot of it coordinates the virtual writing center, the online for distance ed that we use.
We'd like to know a little bit about like your daily routine, but as you tell us about that, maybe at first you could mention more of the parameters of your job. What I mean is, you're Writing Center director, but you also mentioned graduate programs.
Right.
So do you do any teaching, or is all the entirety of the responsibility Writing Center?
No, the Writing Center for me is just a part of my job. I teach. I have a 1-1 teaching load. Our normal teaching load in our department is a 2-2. I get a course release. Although I wish I could get actually another, like a release from some other service obligations, because I'd much rather teach, but because they always call it a release, and I always think, I don't want to be released from teaching.
Right.
But so it goes. So typically I teach, in the fall I teach the Writing Center practicum for the new TAs, and that's every year. And then typically in the spring, with only one other course, I teach in our Rec Comp grad program. And I teach a seminar in that typically. One of the things I miss about the job, one of the costs of it, is on a regular basis I don't teach undergraduates much anymore. I don't get to teach first year writing. I miss that. One of the things I always liked doing was that as comp director I always taught first year writing as much as possible. So I love teaching the graduate students.
Right.
I don't want to miss that, but the limited teaching, is a limit. So that's, and then I have, obviously I'm supposed to produce research too.
Right.
A third of my job description or whatever is supposed to be being produced and being a productive scholar, whatever that means. So it's coordinating those things. Now, 10 hours a week, obviously I'm in my office at the Writing Center a lot more than that. Now sometimes I'm working on research, or I'm reading grad student dissertation chapters, or meeting with graduate students. But I'm often in that office because I think a lot of the WPA work in a Writing Center is being available for informal mentoring. For these new consultants who may have an immediate question or an immediate problem, or things in Writing Centers, the issues don't come up on a regular basis. As comp director, I could have more time away.
Oh, interesting.
Because as comp director, things, things came up, but not usually sort of as spontaneously as they do in the Writing Center. And that was actually a better job to have when I was comp director. I still had my sons at home. And as comp director, I could get away in the afternoon, pick them up from school, so I liked that. I find I'm in my office in the Writing Center more. I don't mind that, other than it's a tiny office, but it's just sort of a difference between the way the two systems work. As comp director, I think you find you're more in your office dealing with emails and reports and scheduling and that kind of thing, more than you are. I mean, you deal with that in the Writing Center, but there's just the Writing Center administration seems to me, at least in my context, more about teaching and less about, being the director of a comp program with 5,000 students a year is more like chairing a department, right? When you've got 80 instructors and GTAs and all of that, chairs of departments have a very different life than faculty do, and directing a writing program like that is more like doing that. The Writing Center is a different sense. And it's been interesting, the difference between, because again, and we talked a little bit about this earlier, when I go in, I often just go around to the consultant's office and sit down and we just chat, and sometimes it's about what's going on in their sessions, and sometimes it's about other things, and part of that is about community building, but part of it is those spontaneous conversations, and you have to, there's a phrase that the poet Joel Oppenheimer used about poetry, saying, be there when it happens. But that is sort of what you have to do in Writing Center work. You have to be there when it happens. Whereas in the comp director job, occasionally that would happen, but more often, if a student had a grievance, it had to go to the instructor, and then it would come to me, and there was much more sort of a predictable chain of command, or set of processes. Which again, that's useful in some ways, but it's distancing in others.
So probably in your typical day as a Writing Center director, you have facets of collaboration that are expected and unexpected.
Right.
So maybe you could describe that phenomenon?
Right. So the unexpected ones are the kind we were talking about, often dealing quickly with students, with a consultant who may be having an issue in a session or wants to talk through what's going on. There are also the informal things of people who come in, someone, my office is right by the front door, somebody comes in and wants to know more about the Writing Center. The person working at the desk, my administrative assistant, often works that, helps that, but sometimes it's me, or a faculty person calls. You want to be available for that, because you don't want people coming into a Writing Center and not feeling welcomed and like they want to come back and getting their questions answered. So those are sort of the informal things. The other thing as being director, though, is I'm expected to be, and need to be the face of it in other kinds of settings.
Right.
So, the meeting with the dean of the libraries and the associate provost, and the meetings with the reference librarians, coordinating our work with them, and the meetings with, those kinds of things. I'm expected to go there and advocate, get resources, do that kind of work because, it's work I, hope that I'm okay at. I also have the institutional power to do that,
Right.
and so on. So those are the kinds of more formal things. Within the Writing Center, and working with the assistant directors and the associate director, occasionally we set up times that we have to all get together and meet. In general, since we're all there, it tends to be more, Adam has a question, he pokes his head in my door, I have a question,
Right.
I poke my head in. He's Adam Robinson, who's the associate director.
Right.
We do that kind of ongoing meeting. So, which is funny, when I have to do the end of the year evaluation of his work, I'm supposed to talk about our meeting schedule, and you feel like saying, well, okay, 10:25, 11:13 in the
Right.
day, it just sort of, but, we make something up. So I think that kind of thing, and Adam takes, we both do a lot of the kinds of daily work, but we do divide things up. He does, thankfully, does the budget, he does the scheduling, he does a lot of that kind of work, and he's a full-time staff person doing that. So he's
interesting.
always he's in the Writing Center every day, pretty much. And I'm doing often a lot of that other kind of, conceptual work other kinds of places. Not that I don't do some of that, obviously we collaborate about the budget and so forth, but I'm also the one who's then, if somebody has to email a professor or a dean or somebody like that, then that's going to be me.
Well, I think that writing centers are interesting in part because they move around in universities in terms of where they're going to be housed or who the director might report to.
Right.
I also think writing centers are interesting too because, for instance, at your writing center you have a staff member as the assistant director, right?
Right.
And some might say, oh, that should be a faculty member.
Right.
But from my experience, it doesn't seem to make that much of a difference. It's really depending on who you hire,
Right.
and then the label's another thing.
Right.
Do you have any kind of complications, not from within, but from without, regarding faculty and staff? Like review, you're
Yeah.
maybe reviewed in a different way as
Yeah,
director as
yeah.
compared to the assistant director?
Yeah, it is.
Which I don't think is contentious, it's just how it is, but
Right.
others might say, well...
Yeah,
maybe we
obviously I go through the personnel review that faculty go through. I'm a member of the English department, I do that. Adam, as the associate director, works for me, as my administrative assistant, Robin, works for me, so I do a staff evaluation of them every year. Yeah, so that is sort of unusual. The advantage of the staff position, say for the associate director, I think that is useful is, for one thing, you do need someone in a writing center who, you got to have somebody there of some kind most of the time.
Right.
It's not like the comp program where, if I were out for a day and my administrative assistant there were out for a day, sometimes you just put a note on the door saying, there's no one in the office right now, send us an email.
Right, right.
That you can't do that in a writing center. I will say this, I do think Adam got his MA at U of L. I think he's an argument for somebody who, I think he's a great scholar. He's the best tutor I've ever seen. He's a great administrator. It would be a shame for somebody like him who wants to do that kind of work not to be able to find a position where he can do that and really excel at it, But it does have less status, if I'm gone, he's the associate director. He doesn't have that, but realistically, that hasn't been a problem for us.
Oh.
We collaborate really well, I think.
So when you think about your work at the Writing Center, can you talk about maybe a few highlights, something that like really went well, be that whatever it may
Mhm.
be.
Well, I think one of the things that we are trying to do,
Mhm.
when I came in, the Writing Center, Carol Mattingly sort of established the Writing Center at U of L in its current incarnation in 2000, and she came in. And she established sort of all the basic processes that we still
Okay.
use and did it really well,
Mhm.
and I saw no need to change that. When I came in, I thought what we needed to do was, we were doing a really great job of tutoring students, which is our main function. But I thought we could do more to be promoting a culture of writing within the university. And I thought we could be doing more outside of undergraduate students. And so some of the things that we spent the first year really trying to do outreach to graduate students. So we worked with the dean of the graduate school to do a series of workshops for graduate students about graduate student writing issues, because there's just so little instruction for graduate student writers. We started a series of dissertation writing retreats. We not only do, we do one in the fall that's all weekends, one in the spring that's a week long, and one that's a virtual writing, dissertation writing retreat for people who are ABD and have left town
Right.
and, haven't finished.
And they're not there to come in.
Yeah, and we established this new position that's down at the med school to work with writers there, with the support there. So we spent that first year really saying, what can we do to do, and we continue to do those things, right? We haven't stopped doing those, but that was sort of year one. Year two, this was Adam's idea. He said, we talk to departments a lot about what we do, but we don't talk to other organizations on campus. So we started going to advising, the counseling center and the international center and first-year studies and first-year experiences, and saying, hey, here's what we do, sort of a marketing kind of thing. And that was great, but what we found as we started to work with them, that they said, well, hey, let's collaborate on this, or let's work on this,
Right.
or, so we'll go in and do a workshop, but then they'll also come and do things for us, and we've, it's become a more collaborative endeavor, effort, that has paid off in a lot of other kinds of ways across campus. So what we're trying to do is, and we're doing things like, we sometimes things just to sort of make writing more present. So we've really, we've done a social media sort of overhaul. We've overhauled our webpage, but we have a really active Twitter and Facebook account and a blog, all of which aren't just, a lot of Twitter accounts just from writing centers just say, well, we have appointments available now.
Right.
We also post links and ideas about writing that we frame in ways that are trying to make people rethink what writing is and how writing is taught, trying to sort of get at some of those myths about writing that might be in the university and beyond. And then trying to get some of these community campus groups that are our partners to retweet those, because they have their own accounts. So that's one way we're trying to do that. We did a thing this year where we collaborated with the Fine Arts Department to do a juried student art show called Writing in the World, where the student artists did artwork that somehow was about writing, and then we had an opening and displayed it in the Writing Center and brought people up there and hung the art in the Writing Center. We do, we support readings, and we're hoping to support other kinds of just informal writing groups meeting in the Writing Center. So what we're trying to do is continue to do the tutoring, we go into classes and do workshops in classrooms for teachers if they want us to come in and do a workshop. But also just to sort of create a writing center, and a culture of writing in the universities. To me, that's been one of the really exciting things to do, is to try to expand our mission. While not forgetting the other, Obviously, the day-to-day work we do, a lot of it is the consulting and the teaching of writing to people in individual sessions.
One of the areas of my research had been about Thailand, and then one of the things I learned is how temples there function. And I had a very different notion of temples there, but I learned that it's really more of a social center. It's not
Right.
religiously connotated
Right.
by a schedule the way Americans might think of a church. And then those Buddhists are doing a lot of other work
Right.
that's not really about Buddhism.
Right. Right.
It doesn't seem, on the surface. So your work with the Writing Center seems very similar that way, where you have a very large social network. But in that context, one of my curiosities is, for instance, when you work with the medical school, two-pronged kind of curiosity. One is when you give them workshops, where do they take place? And then the other is when you began the relationship, did you need to talk much to the fact that you're not in medicine?
Right, right. Well, we always, yeah. So to the first question, well, we were fortunate in that when we tried to start that relationship with the medical school and the health sciences campus, their director of graduate studies was very eager to do it, and was willing to listen to us. I mean, he had sort of one conception of what writing was and how writing should be taught, but when we said, well, we actually sort of approach it more in a different kind of way, and he was open to that. So that was really helpful. We had his buy-in. And he gave us the space, and he helped us promote it.
Oh, good.
When we do our graduate student workshops, what we tend to do is we do them on our main campus, and then we do another iteration downtown at the med school. So we tend to do them both kinds of places. The question about, we always get this question about, and we get it from we have a very big engineering school, an engineering graduate school, and people come in and say, well, your English department people, what do you know
Right.
about improving magnetic resonance imaging, technologies and so on, to which, our answer is, nothing. We don't know, you have to know the content.
Right.
We can't tell you the content. What we do understand is rhetoric and writing. We understand about audience. We understand about genre. We understand about the genres of science writing. We understand about style and the position of writers and all of those things. And we give you good responses that reflect what we know about that.
Right.
And sometimes when I tell consultants is, you hit a word or phrase that you don't understand, then the question to ask the writer, the science writer, is, okay, I don't understand this phrase. Is this commonly understood in your field? And, so do we need to explain it or not? And we have to trust the writer to do that, but that it's okay to do that. And what we often find is the students from the med school, and one of the reasons it's nice to have one person who works down there, is that then she sees them over and over and over again, often, as they work on a dissertation. And she gets to know, she actually does get to know that project. Now, she doesn't understand everything about it, but she develops a familiarity with it. The other thing that we often ask them to do initially is, the first time, let's say I meet with somebody from engineering, is I'll say, okay, take 5 minutes and explain to me your project, in layman's terms, and let me ask you some questions about it. Let's get a baseline of where we are.
Right.
So I sort of have some, and almost any project can be described, in enough sense that I can get it. And I think that's also a useful thing for them to step back from it for a moment and try to do that, and then answer some questions about it before we get into the text.
It's an incredibly rich and complicated situation. It just occurred to me that, like with the medical center, they're really thinking of Writing Center as writers.
Yeah.
Which is true, but when you don't know the subject, a lot of times you do, as you suggested, you're more of a reader.
Yes.
And
yes.
so you're asking you're asking questions which they may not have thought of in terms of style or presentation and that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Any particular challenges at the Writing Center besides getting everything done?
Yeah, I mean, well, we have some of the challenges that everyone has. No matter how many times and how much outreach you do, there are always people who are going to send their students over, go to the Writing Center and have them fix your paper, right?
Right.
Or the idea that we're only there for remedial work, all of those kinds of things. Where, we'll be there 100 years and we'll still be fighting those issues. Funding is always an issue. I'm always scrounging for money. I get money from 4 different sources, and we're always scrounging for, it reminds me sometimes of those, like World War II, like, movies where, like, they're always scrounging things to, like, build tunnels and break out of prison camps. you always feel like you're cobbling,
Improvising something,
improvising,
not quite right, but it'll
yeah,
work.
But it works, right? You know, so we need computers, and Adam found these computers that this department doesn't need, and they'll do, and you know, I mean, so we're always doing that. So that's an issue. We've got an issue where we're growing a lot. We're about going to hit our capacity of the number of consultants that we have. I don't know where the money's going to come from more staff. I don't know where the space is going to come. So those kind, you know, success is creating some issues. We'd like to do more with multimodal techs and digital techs. We don't have either the facilities to do that, because you really need rooms where you can shut a door to do that kind of work. You can't really do that in the middle of a big open room. And we need the technology. We don't have either at the moment. So that limits what we can do about that. We're on the third floor of the library now, which has some advantages in that it's got a beautiful view, floor to ceiling windows. It's gorgeous. We're hard to find. You got to go way into the library, call all the way up to the third floor. We're the only student service kind of thing up on the third floor. So actually we're talking with the dean of the libraries about moving to the first floor, which means we would lose our beautiful view. But the deal is, you know, the deal we're working on is that we'd go to the first floor, we get more visibility and more space, and be able to have some of these other kind of facilities for multimodal work, and maybe our own little dedicated classroom space to do workshops. And so those negotiations are going on. So, you know, those are some issues that we're having as well. You know, I like everything that we're doing. I feel like I've done about, you know, there are a number of other things I'd like to do. I'd love to have a writing fellows program. I'd love to set up a thing like Brad Hughes has done at Wisconsin, where we have set up, train undergraduate peer tutors, and then set up writing centers in public libraries in the city, particularly in the West End and South End, which are poorer areas of the city, and you know, less. But again, I don't have the staff and resources to do that at the moment, so those have to be on paper. So that's the biggest frustration right now, is that I feel like we're working really well, but we're about at our capacity. Yeah, so that